because I wear lots of hats. I work for the Queens Library as a compost coordinator. I'm a landscape designer. My bachelor's in landscape architecture. I work for a design build company in Brooklyn that focuses on landscape urbanism, and I primarily build vegetated green roofs with them, not many farm or produce producing green roofs, but lots of green roofs. I teach a class about that, and I've also got this side project where me and some friends have created this urban farm. It's in Long Island City, Queens. It's called Smiling Hogs Head Ranch. Today I'm going to be kind of talking about the trials and tribulations of trying to get that up and running. And it's really kind of specific, and I found out that I was going to be on the policy and economics panel, so I tried to focus on some areas that might be more helpful to other people as we push forward in these types of things. I'm really thankful to be at this conference. I think that these conferences are lots of fun. There's lots of people talking about great things that they're doing. It's also really important to talk about the hurdles that we have to get over in order to make this more of a broad spectrum thing and not always get caught up in so much red tape. So I initially pitched that I was going to talk about Smiling Hogs Head Ranch. My fonts aren't showing up properly, but that's all right. We were founded in 2011, in early spring. We had a little time where we just kind of kickstarted everything. We actually incorporated as a C Corp in 2012, and we still don't have a formal agreement with the property owner. We're going to talk more about that later on. So just to give you a little bit of context, this is where we are. We're in Long Island City, Queens. The little green dot is us. This is the Newtown Creek, which is the border of Queens and Brooklyn. So we're western Queens, close to North Brooklyn. In order for us to find a place to farm, and a lot of people talk about, oh, there's not really land, but there actually is. The 596 acres is, a great resource for people. We started around the same time 596 acres did. We didn't have that resource available to us whenever we were doing this. So while I suggest that now, there's also other maps. There's Oasis maps. We looked at Google aerial views and saw like green splotches, and we rode our bikes around our neighborhoods and said, that looks like a great place. We identified like 5 or 6 different spots. We did our research. We looked at who the property owners were. We visited the sites. We looked at where the fences were, if there's no posted keep out signs, what was going on the site. And we settled on this one. It's roughly an acre-sized lot. It's misshapen. It's got active railroad use. And there's lots of topographic stuff. There's shady areas. There's a little sunny area. We've got about a 1/5 acre. This is kind of the aerial of what's going on. There's a bunch of other stuff around us. There's K through 8th grade school for autistic children right across the railroad tracks from us. Right across the street is a huge Sunnyside rail yards, very kind of industrial use. There's a police department, the Queens property clerk, where confiscated goods are held, lots of guns and drugs. And there's industrial neighbors around us as well. So those are some of the uses that I just went over. On site, we actually also have, it's called the Degnon Terminal. It was a private property where these manufacturing companies would receive shipments from the East River, come up the Newtown Creek, they'd unload into freight trains, and they would come right through our site to the factory. They'd process them and send them back out as finished goods and products. So that was the Degnon Terminal. That also meets up with the Montauk Cutoff, which brings commercial traffic from the Sunnyside rail yards to the Montauk line, going further out to Long Island. That is currently still active. It is set to be decommissioned in 3 to 5 years. So we're looking forward to that and hopefully taking over even more space as that line is no longer active. There's, on site, there's kind of an informal dumping site. People kind of drop trash off on our perimeters. Sometimes they used to back up trucks and dump trash off inside. So we have a lot of cleanup. There's an active cat colony that has been there to register the NYC cat colony, and that is a thing. So the lady, there's actually a bunch of people that take care of it. There's one primary lady that registered the cat colony. She's been there for years. We respect the cats. And it's nice to have them as neighbors. They add a little bit of interest, and I think they keep down the rat population. And we have a fellow that actually lives on site during, vendors. So he comes in and he sleeps there, and we talk to him. He seems like a nice enough guy, but he still actually stays there some nights a week. So we have that going on. This is, one of the pictures of the feral cat colony houses. We have over a dozen of these scattered throughout the site, and there's probably hundreds of them going on up the Montauk Cutoff all the way to the creek. This is just some pictures of what we did to clean up the site. We came in, we rented a rototiller 3 weekends in a row in early spring 2011. We did some sod busting. It was lots of work. We put in a plant order for the Grow NYC annual plant sale, and we planted our first year. We had drip irrigation that we set up, and we funded all this ourselves. This is a volunteer effort. There's 10 of us at the time, and we took water from the hydrant. We got a hydrant key. We still need to get a permit. We're working on that. And we're watering. We would love to build a water harvesting structure, but that requires more coordination with the property owner to build structures. We, of course, managed our crops. We did a lot of weeding. When you first start something in the ground, there's lots of weeds that want to come back. So we're still constantly dealing with that. And harvesting, we grow lots of different produce, coal crops, nightshades, cucurbits, just kind of across the board, whatever we can grow, whatever we wanted to eat, we just planted it. We also grow fruit trees and berry shrubs. I'm really interested in establishing long-term stuff that will continue on. If the MTA, who's the property owner, says that I have to leave, I want fruit trees to remain. And I want them to have to bring in the heavy machinery to get rid of them. And there's planning and organizing that has to go on. We meet every once in a while and we talk about how we're going to do things. We try and figure out, we're a bunch of guerrilla gardeners, and we've been saddled with trying to figure out how to sustain this thing and keep it going. We were kind of flying under the radar for the first couple of years. So we have a lot of quandaries, just things that are kind of up in the air and things that need to be addressed, including the fact that we were guerrilla farmers and now we need to try and come up with some way to make this thing a little bit more a succession plan, if you will, from the keynote speaker just a moment ago. Issues of ownership and the garden license agreement that the owners have extended to us. We need to get insurance, and we're going to talk about all these things in these slides coming up. So we are just a bunch of guerrilla gardeners. We have a very informal arrangement, which is not one. We don't have an agreement with the property owner. We don't sell produce, so we don't have an agreement with anyone. We don't have financial, transactions going on really. It's all volunteer basis. It's not for profit. We did incorporate in order to try and move towards these things, but we don't have a real long-term plan. There's no business plan in place. We are moving towards formal agreements. The MTA did find out about our operations, and they did reach out to us. They called me on my cell phone. I don't know how they got that number, but they did. And they kind of did what we were doing. They told me that they're going to decommission the Montauk Cutoff, which is an active line right now, and that they heard about this urban farming thing, and they thought it was really cool, but that's not the business they're in. And they went out and walked the property that they were decommissioning, and they saw crops growing. So they were like, this is pretty cool. But they want to let us continue doing it, but they want us to do it in a formal capacity. So we need to enter into a land use agreement with them. And we're moving towards that. In order to get into that land use agreement, we need to get insurance. We needed to incorporate so that we could start a business banking account, so that we could purchase that insurance as an entity rather than me purchasing insurance. And we have to have signed waivers for people coming on property. So there's lots of snags. We were held up because we didn't have money for insurance, and we finally got a little bit of money for insurance. I called the other day actually, and he said, "Oh, well, that's great, but now the LIR wants to comment on our agreement." So we're on hold for another few months. So that's, the ownership is the property is owned by the Metropolitan Transportation Authority and the Long Island City Railroad. We thought that it was owned by some billboard companies. There's a couple billboards on site. It was very unclear when we looked at the property records. So that was an interesting thing. But in reality, the snails and the mugwort kind of own the property. I mean, de facto, as a farmer, I can tell you, they're there 24/7, all year round, and they are the owners of that property. So our garden license agreement that the MTA has put on the table for us, and recently kind of taken off the table for comment, but it's a mishmash of other agreements that they've had with other people. It primarily was written for property owners out on Long Island who are adjacent to the railroad that wanted to, put flowers or whatever on their property. It's not a long-term agreement at all. It's revocable within 30 days. They can say, you know what, we need to access the site, you need to have everything off. Well, you have 30 days to do it. So that's not very good. It requires railroad protective insurance. So we have to get insurance to cover the railroad, which is really expensive. It doubles the cost of our insurance. So that's something that's kind of specific to us, but there are other MTA properties that are actually listed on 596 acres now, as I've worked with Paula Siegel and the folks over at 596 acres to get those listed, as well as the representative from the real estate department with MTA to identify those areas that might be good for putting community gardens or urban farms on. So it inherently, like I said, required us to incorporate so that we could get that business banking account, to buy the insurance. There's a licensing fee of $150 a year. This is not rent. We are not renters. We're not leasing the property. This is a license agreement. We do not have renters' rights. Everything is revocable in a very short amount of time. So we're required to do some things. They wanted us to put up a fence. I told them that didn't make sense for us, and we got that taken out of the arrangement. They want us to remove vegetation, and I told them, well, the point of us being there is to put vegetation in, so we got that taken out. But we have to maintain the site and keep things safe. So there's lots of poison ivy on the site, and this is a hazard for people that are coming on site. I've got poison ivy right now because I've been trying to remove it. We struggled within our group of volunteers and guerrilla farmers on how to address this. People wanted to remove it. People wanted to, we tried horticultural vinegar. We tried all sorts of things. I finally just broke down and we were applying some glyphosate to the poison ivy, spot applications, because it's really a nuisance, and it has no place on our farm. Especially in the places that it is, that are very publicly accessible. So we did incorporate as a C Corp status, and I'm going to burn through a bunch of these things. We would like to move towards nonprofit status. We need to get insurance. Most of the insurance companies that we reached out to had no idea how or had no products to offer urban farm. Some of them knew about community gardening, but they didn't understand what we were doing, and part of it was we didn't really understand what we were doing. It's hard for me not to describe what we're doing as a guerrilla farm, but I avoided the terminology with the insurance companies. So there's lots of things surrounding that, and there's no real, we're not city-owned property, so we can't get the Green Thumb insurance. We're not in the Queens Brooklyn Land Trust, so we can't get their Chubb insurance. And it's kind of an expense for us, and we're volunteer-led. We pay for things out of our own pockets, and the insurance that we have is $2,000. And I'm running really low on time here. So we are on railroad tracks. There are urban soils and contaminants. We did get our soils tested. Our lead levels were a little bit elevated. We decided to move forward. There's a big the biggest thing that you can do with heavy metals is to try to control the exposure to the soils, as not too many of them are actually taken up into the soils. Now with organic compounds, that's not necessarily true, and there are lots of organic compounds in railroad tracks. So I'm really big into composting. I posed a question to Scott Stringer earlier, if anybody heard that. I wanted to focus a lot on that, but I'm pretty much out of time, but there is an issue with the community-led composting initiatives and the city-sponsored composting. And right now there is an RFP out, and we do need to take control of this issue and not let it fall into the hands of just large carton companies. So we are a community composting site. We have lots of projects and collaborations. We hope to partner with a nonprofit to offer a job training course to do bioremediation of the soil. We hope to partner with the school next door to be their schoolyard garden so that they can have classes on a regular basis. We have lots of potentialities, but we can't really move forward with too many things until we get into that agreement with our landowner. So, just a couple of nice images as I wrap up, and I thank you guys for coming out and listening to the talk today. I have some really big, kind of far out there intensification of urban agriculture dreams that I would like to do, involving waste runoff from the Long Island Expressway, which goes over a portion of the site, and living machines, and aquaponics, and rice paddies, and irrigation of crops. But that will have to be another time. Thank you so much.